you're looking for that Clint, congratulations, you made it. Yay. It is my pleasure to introduce your clinician today. I know y'all are all like, Mr. Ben Osborne is the trombone professor at Sam Houston State University. Please give him a hand.
So I like to approach this kind of clinic with an idea of how do I want to approach the music so that I can be successful at the audition. With these etudes in particular, the music is a little bit easier than might be the case for normal years. Last year, the music, one of the pieces was quite difficult. And since this music is a little bit easier, then the players have to kind of elevate themselves to be noticed by the judges, especially in a recorded setting where all you have is what you hear on the recording, which I believe ATSSB does recordings for the all-state level, but they probably do live auditions for some of the other levels. So anyway, with all that in mind, I like to talk generally about just trombone and approaching trombone, what's most important, that kind of thing, and then we'll get to the etudes. I'll talk through each etude, play it, talk through it, and play it. If you have the handout, I won't have time to go through everything that I've written out on the notes, but it is a pretty good resource. It's pretty thorough. One of the big ideas I have, I've listened to a lot of auditions like this, and I've been through a lot of auditions myself, and being on the other side of the curtain, I want to hear someone who plays with a beautiful sound and can play their music in time without losing pulse, and then, especially at the high school level, and then if they play in tune, that's like a huge bonus. And so I think it's most important to develop the best sound you can possibly develop, because then the music can sort of take care of itself a little bit more. And you can get away with a lot more if you have a beautiful sound. I remember when I was auditioning, I felt like I had a pretty good sound, but I never was happy with how I played, and I still was pretty successful because I think the sound made up for my lack of accuracy and my response problems and all of that. Which isn't to say don't worry about response or accuracy, of course, but if you develop your sound, I think it's going to put you ahead of the pace when it comes to auditions like this. So develop your sound means basically to find a sound that you like, a trombone sound. YouTube recordings are okay, but not the best. Real professional quality, and just listen to it and imitate it. And so like there's a bunch of solos. You can probably find professionals like Christian Lindbergh and Joel Essie performing, certainly on CDs or on iTunes. I recommend buying those, of course. But listening to them on YouTube is a decent substitute, and you can buzz along with the music that you hear. I like to get my ear saturated with the good sounds, and then have my mind, my body trying to reproduce them through buzzing. And then also I like to conduct along with the music as a way of internalizing things like pulse and expression, like phrasing. So singing, buzzing, and conducting, you can develop a really good sense of pulse, musicality, and then of course sound, because you're trying to match some of the greatest players in the world. So that's just a really good general idea. Let's see, so I think once the sound is there, the next step, the next priority would be to play in time. And a good way to develop pulse is to play a small section of the piece under tempo with the metronome. So like if I'm going to play the opening of the second etude, I would put the metronome on and just insist that the beats happen at the right time. And do that over and over again. It's kind of boring, it's kind of tedious, but it's really productive. Also, just about that as an aside, on trombone, I'm a professional trombone player as well. I play in the Austin Symphony. Our parts are not the most exciting and enjoyable musically a lot of the time. We have to do really boring things, but they're very important. When it's exciting, it's a lot of fun. But most of the time we're playing chords and hits, and of course doing that well is very satisfying. But that's why I like to focus on doing boring and simple things. And really when you have the energy and the motivation to do them at a high level, it loses that sense of being mundane or tedious and becomes kind of an enjoyable process. So getting good at long tones, getting good at matching the articulation of every note, getting good at tuning the scale and the half steps and whole steps. All of that stuff makes life a lot easier. And if we practice that, you know, it's maybe at a rate of 3 to 1 compared to how much time we spend on the etude. Like if you practice for an hour a day, you can spend 40 minutes on fundamentals, 20 minutes on the etude, and the etude will get a lot better than if you spent the whole hour working on the etude. I promise. So you're playing in time, you're playing with a good sound. We've got that developed. The next little icing on the cake is pitch. I think pitch is a very difficult thing to develop on trombone, mainly because we have an infinite number of wrong places to go to play out of tune, and only one perfectly right place to go. And so we have to spend a lot of time listening and finding where that one place is, and scales are a really good way. Sitting there and listening to it. I started writing some finale files now where I have scales on finale at like a quarter note equals 40 for a whole note. And I'll just sit there and play and try and tune with the computer. I think there's probably a better way to do this, but that's one of the ways that I found out, and I found that to be pretty productive. Also drones, using drones from there's an app for iPhone, what's it called? Anybody know this one? Where you can set the drone, you can press pitches, like press a C and a G and then the C.
Tonal energy.
Tonal energy. Sorry, couldn't think of that. And that one's great. Get it on a Bluetooth speaker and just surround yourself with a C and a G playing in perfect fifth and droning the whole time. And then play your C major scales slowly and see if your pitch doesn't get better. Write me a letter if it doesn't get better. Okay? I promise it'll get better. And if you write me a letter if it does too. Thank me for that. All right, so we're getting better at pitch, finding the right place out of a sea of wrong places for each position. And then we have to figure out how we want to precisely articulate every note. And I'll talk about that in detail for each piece. But basically, once all this stuff is working together, we're starting to use the tongue, and the tongue can really mess everything up if we don't use it right. Most of the time, learning and growing up as a young musician, we probably use the tongue incorrectly. And so it's important to think about this idea. Everything is a long tone. Everything we play, even if it's scales, arpeggios, fast, high, slow, loud, soft, it's a long tone. So if I'm going to play a D major scale, what it really is that happens to change pitch in the order of the scale up to the high D. My air doesn't know that I'm moving the slide. My air doesn't know that the tongue is tonguing to create articulation. My air in my corners are just constant, and so I'm blowing through that, and the feel from here and here is the same. It's indistinguishable from here and here. So that's very important. Let everything feel like a long tone. And things that help that is to buzz, smear exercises like the opening of the first etude. Something like that to get the air and the embouchure working together without the tongue interrupting. If you can get that to work together, then we can start to figure out how to place the tongue in the right place to create the desired effect. If you can't get that to work together, it doesn't matter what the tongue does because you have a problem with your tone production. And so we have to sort that out, balance it out, use the abdominal muscles to support the airstream. I think of the abdominal muscles blowing the air through my body to my embouchure, which then the embouchure sort of creates resistance. And then what comes out is sound, and everything else that stays in is a compressed airstream, kind of like. The compression allows for the air pressure that you need to create a beautiful sound. So I think of these muscles working with these muscles to create a compressed airstream. When that happens, then I can move the tongue and interrupt the airstream or dent the airstream in such a way that it doesn't stop it or doesn't destroy the pressure that I want to have, the good pressure of the air pressure, that is. So everything should feel like a long tone, and then it's easy to find, easier to use the tongue in a productive way. So if I want to do a legato articulation, like in the first etude, I would just sit on one note and try and find where the tongue touches in my mouth to create the sound that I want. I'm sort of experimenting with where on the roof of my mouth, how close to the teeth, moving back and forth, and at some point I'm going to find a spot that's a sweet spot, and it really works to get the sound that I like. So we've got all this technical and fundamental things to work on. Of course, we have to be able to play musically, or it's going to be pretty boring. But there is kind of a disconnect when we just try and make music without fundamentals, without technique. I was like that. I grew up as a piano student, and I think I was a far better musician than I was a trombone player. And so I wanted to make music before I could play the trombone well. And I would just try and play beautiful music, but it was way too hard, and I was just not consistent. I was not accurate. And so as a result, I kind of react that we need to focus more on fundamentals so that it enables us to play music more freely. Because if you go into an audition and you make beautiful music, but you miss half the notes, and you play out of tune, and your tone is inconsistent, and your articulations are varied between ranges, no one's going to hear the music that you have in your head that you're trying to reproduce. So the technique, if it's not there, it'll completely distract anybody who's listening from the musical ideas you're trying to communicate. So it's so important. If you want to be able to effectively communicate the music, which we do, it's why we love to play, is because there's something about music that really gets us going, then we have to take the time to eliminate any distraction from the music, which means making everything super consistent, with a consistent articulation, even tone quality. All that stuff that is boring and tedious and mundane, but really useful. So, again, sing, buzz, conduct with the music. I believe this video will go up on the website, and so you might be able to use that as a resource. Hopefully I'll give you a good performance that you can sing along with and buzz along with. I would also conduct along with it. So let's go ahead and move into the first etude, Valse Lentament.